Hey, what's going on, everybody? James Collins here, CPWE.AI. I got David Williams from PIXENDA.com and a fellow musician, a real estate and medical professional in AI. He does a lot of things as well with SEO, AEO, GEO, and builds from the ground up these custom applications that are just unbelievable in my opinion. So I brought David on tonight just so everybody could meet and potentially ask a couple questions along the way. How you doing, David?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining. And start us off. What whenever let's just I love tabletop exercises and I like to play the client. And let's say I come to you as a real estate um, somebody who owns a little agency and says, "Hey, will AI help me in my business?" What kind of verticals or what kind of products would you potentially say, "Hey, this is what we can do. Here's how we start, and we'd love to help."
Well, generally speaking, what I like to do, I'm actually on my other screen here. Okay. First thing we really like to do, and I can tell you what I did just this week, is we look at two different things mainly with them. Is we want to identify first and foremost what their major problems are. So I've tried to find at least three pain points. Where are the bottlenecks? What are they trying to grow their agency? Are they looking to acquire more agents? Are they trying to sell more houses? Are they wanting more buying opportunities? So and then we go into the other side of the conversation, which is, what kind of tech and what kind of things are you currently doing? And so once I've identified that, that gives me a much clearer pathway as to kind of looking at the things that we do. Uh, just a little background on myself. I've been in marketing since 1998. And so long time, about 30 years now. And so I've seen everything and done everything on every level, whether it was small businesses. I've had 4 or 5 of my own small businesses, as well as I've worked on enterprise level with large corporations, managed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of websites, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of social media channels, run millions of dollars in digital advertising for agencies. So having that background, I certainly know that over a year ago, I decided to pivot and focus all my attention on AI, particularly because of the technologies that were changing. And so we started looking at all that and started rebuilding everything that we were doing from the ground up. And that's where we kind of looked at the way we were doing websites. So we now have AI driven website design. I have AI behind virtually everything that I'm doing in that space, uh, as well as AI assisted lead capture, AI driven SEO, EEO, EEAT, AEO. I know it starts to sound like Bingo had his name-o. Uh, and custom AI agents. But to say that there's still a lot of stuff that we're doing that's traditional. And so I will generally peel back the layers with a real estate agent, and I will take a look at their digital footprint. We have multiple programs that will just analyze everything that they're doing, whether it's through all their social channels. Of course, we'll analyze their website from top to bottom. We usually come back with about a 60-point analysis that tells them every single thing they are and are not doing in the digital realm. And then if they're fragmented and their brand is not on pitch, we have another workflow through that. And oftentimes, if it's very fragmented, we will help them to identify that through a mood board. And I have, I can't keep track of how many custom GPTs I have. I have hundreds and hundreds, but I probably use about 20 of them every day. and I have a brand building kit, a brand acceleration kit, brand mood boards. And once I have pulled the data, we're able to actually start to establish what their mood is, meaning they're, and you really can gather a lot of that data by pulling it directly off their Google pages. And their all the testimonials or reviews, hopefully they have some. If they do that, you start to see and get a feel for their personality, how people are responding to them. And then the AI will capture that and start to pull that information together. And then when I go back into the client, I have a very detailed mood board. There's usually like 15 different screens of information, showing what colors represent their personality, showing what fonts represent their personality, and how we could approach it. And I try not to take away from what they're doing, and I always tell them and emphasize all the benefits and or all the beautiful things or nice things that they have, uh, and how we can make it more cohesive, and how going forward we're going to be able to present a much more uh, unified vision and a much more unified brand of whomever they are. And I haven't talked to anyone that doesn't like it when I say that, because they're usually, like I said, all over the board. And they so they need someone to help them to steer that and navigate that. And that's by having these tools, I always tell people, I'm like, you know I love AI and I love what it does for me because it amplifies and it accelerates and has given me the ability to do more now than I could ever do. I used to work with 6 people doing what I'm doing now. I now I just work with 2. Uh, I don't need the other 4 anymore, uh, because it's these tools have changed everything for us. So that's kind of the long and short. I could go just on real estate alone. I would we'd have to jump on a call at some point, and I can share my screen because everything I said was visual, and I have visuals that go with all that. But I have to be a little more prepared, especially when you see one of my mood boards,
I'd
how I
love to
use
see one
AI,
of your mood boards. Yeah.
and how I use AI to generate those. And I use ChatGPT for that. It's kind of cool, because I have a custom GPT that knows exactly how to create those. Uh, and again, it's based on user input. And so the more information, and one of the main things like we're doing here tonight, I never talk to clients anymore outside of Zoom. I use Zoom for everything. I know some people like Google Meetings. That's fine. Some people like, I don't know, there's 3 or 4 things, whatever even we're on right now. But Zoom is just kind of, raised the bar a lot, uh, because I've got AI, in the background recording the entire thing. So every single thing they say uh, is recorded, and then I'm able to take that and create actionable steps based on that conversation. Whereas if I send them to a landing page, had them fill out an intake form, it's going to give me probably 20% of what I really needed. Whereas when you get them talking, they just keep going and they just keep talking, and the AI is kind of helping me get all that information. And I'm like, and then I'm able to literally just take that, create actionable steps, instantaneous response back to the client. And it's able to identify and kind of tell them where we're going next. And that's where the value of that intake is.
So you said about a year ago you had an experience that made you go all in on this. What happened? What stopped someone that's been a 30-year marketer in their tracks and said, "Hey, we need to pivot"?
Chat GPT, in a nutshell. It was, once that came out, uh, I realized, and to be honest, going before that, I was immensely burned out. Didn't want to really even do anything in marketing. I'd kind of pulled away from it for a few years, and that was coming down from a massive large account, the one that I mentioned, where I had hundreds and hundreds of clients in the U.S., Canada, Virgin Islands, and basically no life. And it was, and it wasn't because I didn't know what I was doing. It was just because the technology, it required, that you had to do a lot more. Anytime you had to do SEO or you had to do content development, back then it was written from scratch. I mean, just 12 months ago, we were writing it from scratch. We were creating SEOs to optimize blogs, creating SEOs, optimized posts, social posts, all that. But there was so much time, effort, and energy that had to go into that, and so much analysis that honestly, after having done it for so long, I just was like, I just didn't even know if I wanted to do it again. And then ChatGPT comes out, and it didn't take too long to realize, okay, if this thing gets better, and I haven't told everyone when it first came out, and I told them to download it. I said, we're all going to make this thing smarter. I said, so use it, engage with it. I said, because if it's going to do 1/10 of what I think it's going to do, we're about to see everything in the world change. And so it did.
I said
And
the same.
but then I started, like in any developer or anyone who's built something from the ground up, I just dove in with a bunch of other developers and, started looking at Make. N8N wasn't there at that time. At least it wasn't talked about. And then Airtables, and a little bit of ChatGPT. And so in the beginning, I was creating, different workflows. I was actually using Leonardo when it first came out. And so we would create, I was creating those mini 30-second videos that people slammed the internet with right in the beginning, which, but that didn't totally excite me, to be honest, mainly because I just didn't really like Make, and I didn't really like messing with Airtables. But, that's all we had. And it was a way to get from point A to point B, through triggers and automations. And so I started thinking at that time, okay, I just need to stay here. I need to just keep doing this, and pay attention to what everyone's doing, and then it seemed like last summer or going into fall that it seemed like practically overnight, once we got to ChatGPT 3, and then 11 Labs hits the scene, and now you've got, voice that has potential, and you've got the video, of course, that was starting to improve. And then Midjourney hits the scene, which thank God they got away from Discord, because I didn't even do anything with them because of that. And now all I ever use is Midjourney. And so it was that. And then Suno came out. I've been a musician since I was like 8 years old. That, and I'm not one of those kind of people who look at something like that in fear and trepidation. I've got a lot of friends who are extremely successful in the music business. I'm right outside of Nashville. I've, performed and played and done pretty large shows with a lot of different people. And I'm a tech head. So when I see something that comes out, I'm like, well, I kind of like it. I want to see what it's going to do. And I started with Suno the day it came out. And I don't know, at last check, I probably got over 700 or 800 songs in here. And I've told people it's, to me, the benefit of it, and particularly where it is right now, which is, to me, it's just absolutely phenomenal, is it's one of the greatest co-pilots for writing songs ever. I don't have to drive downtown. I don't have to sit in a room with 4 or 5 people and bounce ideas off. Got way too many things going on right now. But if I get a really good idea, I get a rhythm or a beat in my head, I can go in here. Now, of course, you can upload your own music, and it'll drop in the bass tracks and whatever vocal style, whatever it is you want. And then if I've got some lyric ideas, I can go backwards and forwards on those. I don't use Suno for lyrics ever. My wife and I are very big sticklers on that because we know how to write lyrics, so we do that ourselves. So whenever I do create something, which I've never published to the world, uh, I like to be the one behind the lyric. And so that all of that being said, that all those things all coming together created the perfect storm for me. And I told my wife, I said, I said, I'm definitely getting back into marketing. I said, but I'm not going to do it the same way. And I'm not going to have to this time. And that's what led me to the last 1,800 hours of my life.
So you let me peek behind the curtain on your real estate verticals, your apps that you've built. And one thing I really like for real estate, I know I swap from music because I do love Suno myself, but I will stay on the subject all night long if I don't jump off of it. Uh, on the real estate side, I noticed that you built one that builds listings, and then you built one that writes copy, and you've got all of these integrated together. And have you had pain points from real estate agents before that said, "Hey, I'd love something that just could build a listing from a picture," or something similar to that?
Well, previous to ChatGPT, I mean they basically had to just have someone who was really creative at writing, and so I know in some of the larger agencies I'm working with, they have a specific person on staff that does that, and the and so anytime you can, what I've told them, I said the real key is, I said, yes, you can write a beautiful listing, but whom is that listing speaking to? You know, have you developed a persona around that listing? And that makes a big difference because are you, if you're selling, say, a $350,000 home, or even 200, 300,000 or whatever, which is almost impossible to find around here. But if you go a little further out, you certainly can. You're going to be speaking largely to Gen Z. How you communicate to Gen Z is a little different than how you communicate to baby boomers. Uh, and then, of course, they have all their legal stuff that they deal with the fair housing laws and all that. So you have to train the AI to be aware of that. I make sure that if I'm using Claude or if I'm using ChatGPT, it's in the prompting. I'm very emphatic about stating that you must follow fair housing laws. Never communicate, follow best practice. That way, when the content is created and it's handed off to the realtor, it has the appropriate language. It's speaking to the appropriate audience, and in some cases has the correct disclaimers. And the but the relationships I have with the agents, that fortunately that they have one person who reviews the content, because I've told them, I said, AI is great, but is it always great? Please read everything before you press go. And I never had them. I would say, I know I did, just in the last 2 or 3 months, probably did 75 blog posts. Actually, he told me today it was 51, and only 2 came back for revision.
Wow.
So that's how well trained that is on that particular agency. It knows everything about that group here.
So what's the important of blog posts?
It's everything to me, because we're optimizing for neighborhoods and communities. And also, one thing that estate agents don't really fully understand in the marketplace is that you should be knowledgeable about your community. You should know that June 21st is Experience Spring Hill Day. Why do I know that? I just drove past it on my way to my studio here. And so that's already out. We put that out 2 weeks ago. And you want the search engines to be able to, recognize somebody types something in, or they type in an event that's going on. So you want to vary your content, and depending upon the agent or agency, I tell them to put 3 blogs a week. If they, if they're working with me, we can do it. We repopulate all the content. We look at the schedule. We identify the communities. In this case, we have 8 to 12 communities and neighborhoods and or cities that we're um, looking at. So it's Spring Hill, Franklin, Brentwood, Nashville. And there's always something going on. And there's always something going on in these neighborhoods. There's always something going on in these communities. Uh, and then you bring that in with market reports and market data. And then going outside of the region, we also know where they're coming from. We know that they're moving in from Chicago. They're moving in from uh, identified neighbors. I know the communities and the neighborhoods that they're moving in from. And so we will optimize. And ironically enough, they're moving from Miami, Florida to Nashville. And so we'll create content, are you moving from Miami to Nashville? Well, the Gilly group is here for you, that kind of thing. And
Nice.
so it's, and the reality is no one's doing this. Okay. They're not, the few that are doing it well, but they're far few and in between. And it's largely because they don't, either they don't know, or they don't have the kind of cool tools that I do that can get this stuff done fast. Because when I train a group of agents, i.e., chat GPTs, custom GPTs, or custom Claude workflows, uh, and it's identified, the it only gets better and better and better and better, to where it's like almost mindless now for me to produce this, because it's already finishing my sentences for me. It's already saying, can you, give me some insights as to what's going on in Brentwood, Tennessee over the next 2 weeks. Oh, okay, and there it is. Okay, good. Okay, let's go ahead and repopulate all that content, and then we repopulate the content. We have what's called the PIXENDA Business Intelligence app, where we have uh, LinkedIn, X, TikTok, Facebook, the blog, WordPress, and probably left one off. My brain's fried. I've been up forever. Uh, so all the content is repopulated for all those platforms, and it's specific to those platforms. So if we're posting on Instagram, we add extra emojis. If we're posting on Facebook, we add a few more emojis. And if we're posting on LinkedIn, it's going to be a more professional post, factual based. It certainly won't sound like it's on Instagram. And then the you have to follow best practices for Google. If you're posting on your Google Business blog, which we do that as well. It's usually a truncated version of the post that's going to be seen on the website. And all that content is populated for those specific things that I said. And my AI, who is trained for this particular agency, is able to do that very, very rapidly, and can, generally speaking, can create a week's worth of content in minutes now.
That's
But
amazing.
it's like I tell people, because people are like, well, if you got AI doing everything, I'm like, well, when a plumber comes to the house, and he walks in, and he walks up, and he takes his wrench and he bangs the side of a pipe, and all of a sudden everything's working, and he was only there for 10 minutes, and I still got a $300 bill. The plumber is just going to look at me and say, it wasn't the 15 minutes it took, it was the 20 years it took me to figure out how to bang that pipe.
Understood.
And so, and we do try to be fair in pricing, because we want to help our clients.
David, it's been about amount of time to where I want to say I appreciate you being on here, and I don't want to keep you any longer if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have the time. But is there anything else you want to add about Pixenda? Like, let's hear about. I would love to hear about your download, your platform, what you're talking about that will do a full in-depth analysis top to bottom for a customer. And I know this is the light version you get for free, but there is a pro version. So yeah, share your product with us.
Well, there's actually three things going on right now with Pixenda, and we when I built this whole thing out, I looked at it from 2 points of view, and and on one point I was somewhat reluctant, only because it's like previous to AI and everything that's been happening, at least in my world over the last 13, 14 months, I looked at it from the point of view of uh, it used to be kind of dog eat dog, and you were trying to be competitive, and you didn't want to tell anybody about this because this is proprietary information, and uh, so I had to kind of reel some of that thinking back and realize that you've really got 90% of the people I talk to on a day-to-day basis, small business owners, that they really still need help. They all But then you're always going to have a subset of people that want to do things for themselves. So what we did is, as we looked at this, Pixenda.com, we have developed a full service side part of the business. And honestly check every 2 weeks. You'll probably see I added something else. But I mean, right now we have 17 different services, and there's probably 3 or 4 or 5 sub services within those services. So probably well over 20 plus services. But then on the other side is we are developing, uh, which is this has happened largely because of all of the custom agents that we've developed that will be released to the public on the AI side of Pixenda. And for that, we'll have a subscription-based service. All these workflows or all these custom GPTs that I'm talking about are going to be made publicly available. And that way, if you want to learn how to build a business from the ground up. And part of this comes back to my passion, having started a business very young, 1998, knowing absolutely nothing about anything. I was actually supposed to go to Middle Tennessee University. I came in from the University of Cincinnati and finished my degree, and something else happened. We'll go down that rabbit hole another night. But I realize there are three types of business owners, and having had all of them. And one is the person who is starting a business today who knows absolutely nothing about how to start a business. We've developed a complete custom GPT system for that person. So if they've got an idea and they want to run that idea through the idea analyzer, it's already pre-prompted. It already knows how to respond and can help you evaluate whether your idea is valid or not. And then if it is or has some sort of validity, it will guide you through the next progression, which is, what do you do with your idea? Well, in my world, ideas basically come down to three things. Number one, they come down to, is this idea proprietary? Is it an intellectual property? Is it something I just need to be quiet with? Is it the Colonel's secret recipe? I need to shut up. Is it a patentable idea, or is it something I should be trademarking? And so when you identify either an idea, or whether it's going to be a product or a service, it's going to logically go through one of those places. So what I did is created a custom GPT that says, okay, here's what you need to do next. Let's take you over here to the United States Postal, not postal, but USPT.gov, whatever. And let's do a deep analysis with, this idea, and see if someone else has already thought of it, what's valid, what's not. Or maybe you think you have the coolest name ever. Um, and here's the crazy part is, here I live in this world, and I've got two brothers and a sister, and my other brother and down in Florida calls me to tell me, he's, starting another version of his company. He basically inherited a ton of clients, and he didn't have a name for a business. And he went ahead and registered his name, and, you know, put all the nice colors on his truck and did all that. And I said, "Hey, Bill, did you by chance check to see if that was available?" No, why would I do that? It was not available. So anyway, he's got a nice, pretty truck that is infringing on someone else's trademark. And
How
so I told him, I said, "I can't help, buddy." I said, "I'm not putting anything out there. Nothing. We're going back to square one." I said, "You can't, it just doesn't work that way." And I'm his brother. Okay. So not even family list. And so you have those three areas I'm talking about. So you have the person who starts, never done a thing in their life. Then you have the mid tier. This is a business owner. Maybe they're making 100,000, 500,000, $1 million a year, whatever it is, or they're kind of midway through, and they are going to be, their needs are going to be very different than the person who doesn't know what they're doing, because they kind of know what they're doing, but they don't know how to get to the next place. And so within each of these groups, I probably have anywhere between 10 to 20 different custom GPTs that help them to navigate that specific area that they're in. And then going up to a more uh, advanced level. In fact, it's always nice to have something in front of me. Um, those are, we refer to them as the startup founder, the growing business owner, and the seasoned entrepreneur. The seasoned entrepreneur is someone who's already there. They've probably scaled their business to over 3 to 5 million a year, and their needs are going to be very different than the person who is kind of midway and then versus the person that just started. So we created 10 custom GPTs for that person, and that person basically is thinking more strategically. Uh, you know, uh, they're trying to establish culture. They're identifying what their exit, they should already know what their exit strategy is. They might be looking to hand off the business and get out of the business, whatever it is. And so we methodically went through every single one of these steps to create these customizations, knowing that you have to be able to reach a business owner where they are in order to be able to identify what they need next. And so that's the two different sides. So we have the .com side, which is full service side, and the .ai side, which I always say it's going to be available next week, but it never is because I keep coming up with too many ideas. And my
So we're
developer
doing
like,
CPWE.biz and CPWE.AI as well. And we're trying to separate the two, and it's always next week, next week, next week. I get it.
yeah, it's, well, and we almost had it, and then I came up with a brand new thing. I mean, literally, we were, I was like, told my developer, I was like, I'm sorry, but no, we're not going live. Like, but you're getting paid, so don't complain.
Copy that.
But then the third thing we're working on is our mobile app development. So we'll have another stream going on in that area too, as well. And that's going to be, again, both sides, .com.ai, and they'll be able to either do it themselves or have us do it. And that's kind of the long and the short. And I'm also working on a book. I've got 65 pages written.
I just published one less than a month ago.
Awesome.
We're on the same track, and I appreciate what you're doing. I know that not many will see the value yet, but I do. So, man, I really appreciate you coming on my channel tonight and sharing your story, because to me, that's where value comes, is whenever you're able to share openly with each other and be able to, give what you got, and maybe it helps someone along the way to get to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
So go out to Pixenda, PIXENDA.com. There is a free download there. And if you're smart, you're going to want to keep up with what Mr. David is doing, because he is on the forefront, cutting edge, and doing some great things. So, with that, much appreciated. And good night, everybody.
Good night.